Just leave it to me. What a gown this will be. Bibbidi-bobbidi, bibbidi-bobbidi, bibbidi-bobbidi.
Wouldn't it be great if it was that easy? Hi everyone, my name is Rachel and welcome to Needles and Nerds. Today we're going to take a look at my process in creating a real-life dress from a cartoon animation. In this case, it's going to be Cinderella's ball gown from the classic Walt Disney animation. To start, I compile a lot of clips from the movie to watch over and over and over, and I get to study the color, the silhouette, and the movement of the dress. And at that point, then I can decide three things. I can figure out the patterns and construction methods for the dress. I can figure out the materials I'm going to use, the actual fabric type that I'm going to use for the dress. And then finally, I can also choose what colors I want it to be that most closely represent the animation. So let's start with pattern construction. And for this, we're going to go ahead and start taking a look at those references I was talking about. So first, I'm going to break her dress down into segments. We have her bodice and her skirt. In this case, the bodice includes everything from the sleeves to the poofs, and then the skirt is just about everything else. Looking at the bodice first, since it's such an hourglass, it looks to me like she would need a standard princess type bodice, as well as she probably has a corset for support and shaping. Usually using a princess type bodice integrates princess seams to accommodate for curves as opposed to using darts, and I think that this looks a lot more smooth and elegant. I would mostly adjust a pattern for the neckline to make sure it's low enough and round enough, because she actually has a rather low and curved neckline. Also, the bodice stops right about her waist or right below it, and it comes to a slight point in the front. This is about the easiest part of the dress, because next up, we're gonna look at the sleeves. Oh, the sleeves. The sleeves ended up being the bane of my existence because at first glance they looked like puffs, easy enough. But then as I looked at them, they didn't really look like puffs because puffs tend to have creasing and they're a bit more rounded, and this was too pointy, too smooth for normal puffs. So then I looked at the Disney Parks old design for Cinderella's dress because they had the more pointed, smooth look, but they really emphasized the middle seam as well as they had elastic around the outer portion of the sleeve to make it fit the arm a little bit better, which I did not like. I didn't think that those represented the cartoon very well either. So I ended up creating my own hybrid, but it took a lot of blood, sweat, tears, trial and error, and honestly just about giving up and handing it over to Mindy and let her fix it. But basically we went with a more conical sort of design. We used a lot of miniatures and mock-ups to make sure that we got it right, and then we finally ended up with an end result that I was happy with. And then finally we have the bodice poofs, and I researched how to do this, and they were actually rather simple as well, where it was basically a semicircle that you gathered around the round edge and then you attached it to the bodice, and it was just about done. So basically all I had to do was make a mock-up for sizing and a little bit for the shape, and then once that was finished, they were good to go. Moving on to the skirt, at first glance it would seem that it's a hoop skirt design, seeing how big it is and that it moves in a very conical sort of shape, but this is why we don't use one reference photo to make our dress, because you actually learn a lot by seeing how the dress moves. If it was a hoop skirt, we would see it remain the same shape and it would be very round, and when it moved, it would stay about the same size and move in a bell sort of shape. We see this in Beauty and the Beast in Belle's ball gown, because whenever she's moving as she walks, it all stays the same size and it's very, very round. Cinderella's is not the same way. When Cinderella moves, it grows and shrinks and swishes as though nothing was supporting it underneath. However, it does tend to return to an average, larger size when it's still. And the hip area also tends to stay puffed out and staying in its same position, no matter how it's moving. So initially I thought about creating a huge tulle petticoat that was really padded around the hips and then sort of trailed out towards the bottom, so then it was able to move freely. but I realized it was keeping it a little bit too rounded and it wasn't quite getting me the shape that I wanted. And then I tried pocket hoops, and it actually worked the best out of any method I could think of, because it was able to flare it out a little bit, especially as I was moving. It supported it up at the top of the waist, but it left the bottom free enough to move and flow just like it does in the movie. And this was a plus because now my dress has pockets. I also added one petticoat. When you see her swish, you can see that she definitely has at least one petticoat underneath. I couldn't decide between one or two because it kind of looked like the second one might just be the first one going over itself. So I just settled with one, and then I used another older petticoat that I had that was just a lot shorter so you don't see it, but it helps smooth out the pocket hoops. So now that we've established the shape and the construction plan, we're going to take a look at the materials that I wanted to use for the dress. This is also where seeing the dress in motion becomes very useful, because when we see her twirl, we can tell that the skirt moves easily and seems light and thin. This seemed to really indicate to me that it was silk, and the fact that it seemed to be maybe a little bit shiny. It doesn't have a big sheen to it, but it definitely seemed to not be entirely matte, so silk, a light silk, seemed to be the best choice. For her sleeves and for her poofs, I decided to get a thicker silk because they definitely seemed to not move quite as much. They seemed a little bit more stable and able to support themselves. So it was still a similar material, but it was more matte and it was more secure and thick. Finally, we get to take a look at the color. Now, when most people hear Cinderella, they associate this princess with the color blue. This is very intentional because Disney in their branding has worked really hard to present her, especially in the current Disney princess line, with a bright blue dress. However, if you actually look at the original cartoon, you can see that it's maybe a slight blue tint, but it's actually silver. The best way that you can see this is when comparing it next to the fairy godmother's cloak, which is very much a bright blue, almost that blue that we associate with Cinderella. And her dress is a completely different color. The reason that we may associate it a little bit more with the color blue is because of the nighttime shading. Nighttime often has blue hues to it, so in order to convey a night setting, you can see both Cinderella and the prince's outfits look more blue when they're outside than they do inside the brightly yellow-colored ballroom. In addition to this, the puffs and the sleeves were very much white, so that was a lot easier to go for. Unfortunately, the fabric I ended up going with ended up having a weird color shift to it because part of it was almost more of a cream color and then it shifted into the silver, but the silver was so perfect and it was difficult to tell that it was cream in the fabric store that I ended up going ahead and buying it. And to correct this, or to compensate for it, I went ahead and made the upper portion of my petticoat blue, and then I just made it white towards the bottom where you would see it. So then it helps balance out that color shift and keeps it in the cooler color family. This gave the effect enough that I was very happy with it, and sometimes you just have to find those workarounds. Another thing I'd like to touch on is that I actually used reference photos that the animators used while they were creating the animation. This was really helpful because I could see what the animators were basing their animation off of, and I could see how the animation could translate onto a real human being a little bit better. I definitely wasn't trying to recreate the reference photos, but it gave me a good idea on how I could adjust the animation to an actual dress. And finally, I just like to talk about her accessories. So clearly she has a headband, and I just went ahead and got a normal headband and covered it with the same fabric that I used for the dress so that it matched. I kind of consider her hair a bit of an accessory as well because I ended up getting a wig for it. Her hair is actually more of a strawberry blonde than it is a straight up blonde, and so I felt like getting that coloring was very important. Unfortunately, because I'm new to wigs, I didn't get a wig that was great for an updo support, and so we ended up with more of a lower bun when I got it styled, but I'm really happy with it and I feel like it gives across the impression, and I'll definitely be investing in a better wig that I'm able to get closer to the classic style than I currently do. Additionally, she has gloves. I just went ahead and got gloves at a costume store. They're a little bit different looking from the poofs and the sleeves than I would like them to, but for my purposes they were inexpensive and did the job. but maybe one day I might upgrade to get them a little bit nicer. Also, I went ahead and went with just a silk ribbon for the choker. A lot of people go with a velvet ribbon, but I wanted to stick a little bit more closely with the materials I was already working with to keep the textures consistent, but it's just a black choker. I think anything would work well. Her earrings, currently I'm using just large pearl earrings, but eventually I want to make sure that I make my own because hers are really big. I wasn't able to find any that matched it as closely as I wanted to though. What I plan to do is get giant pearls and cut them in half, then attach them to an earring, so then I can have it very large and spherical but not completely round like the shape seems to be in the movie. And finally, we can't talk about accessories without talking about the glass slippers. Fortunately, I was able to find perfect ones on Amazon. They did seem to be made for costumes based off of the live action movie since they had butterflies on them, but I just removed the butterflies and then I went to a friend who is fantastic working with shoes and with crystals, and I had her make crystal hearts that just absolutely sparkled and attach them to the glass slippers, so then they look a lot closer to the movie. And I'm absolutely happy with them. They're just stunning, especially in the sunlight. And there you have it, my journey into making Cinderella. If you liked this, I've also made Belle and Snow White, so if you would like to see research videos about them, please let me know in the comments below. Also, stay tuned because Mindy and I are going to Walt Disney World for the first Halloween party of 2019, and we're gonna go in costume as Snow White and Cinderella, and we're really excited about this trip. We'll be posting a whole lot about that trip on our Instagram, so follow us at Needles and Nerds. We also plan to maybe stream a little bit. If you'd like to see some footage of us getting our makeup ready and to get some more information about how we chose our makeup looks for our costumes, please subscribe, and we'll be posting a video about that shortly, as well as we plan to post a video about my construction process for Cinderella. Thank you so much for watching. Bye!
Did you change the battery?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I wouldn't have done all this work without changing the battery.
I thought it still said 23%.
There's no way.
Okay.